Well, it's incredible what's been happening in England. I lived here for a year in the 60s, and I met many of my very favorite cookbook authors, and was introduced to many more when I stayed here, and people like Elizabeth David and Jane Grigson. Ultimately, there are people like Jamie Oliver and many, many, many more who have really inspired the cooking of Chez Panisse. I was here a little bit before the big changes in food happened, as they did in the United States in the 70s and the 80s of fast food. But what is happening here now, it feels like a renaissance. I think it's some of the best food, for sure, in the world is being prepared in different restaurants around England. And it's very exciting to see that happening. And they really care about where that food comes from. So it's almost as if the animals have been really identified with names. The products of the Prince of Wales. I'm so impressed with his work, not only with pigs, but his work with farmers and his support of the very biggest picture about food and agriculture. I think there are certain ideas that are really been part of living in England for a very long time. Gardening is one of them. There have been gardens in everybody's backyard, always a little vegetable garden, and all kinds of ornamental gardens with flowers and trees. I mean, botany is a subject that is alive here. And so when you talk about planting food in gardens, it comes very easily. Some of the, again, not only the greatest food writers are in England, but some of the greatest garden writers are in England. So it's very rich history, and it's an easy transition to make, to take a little plot. I remember there were those little plots outside of London where people could plant a vegetable garden and go out and tend it on the allotments. And I was always fascinated by that idea. And I think that has to come back into people's thinking, because once you get into the garden and you grow your own, and this is part of the edible education that I've been talking about, when you grow your own and then you cook it, you want to eat it. And there's nothing like herbs just clipped and put in a dish. It's so irresistible, really. And so I think when you have public people, again, like the Prince of Wales, people like Jamie Oliver, many speaking out, very political, you have a lot of good cooks in restaurants, really good cooks in restaurants. I think of the River Cafe, starting not long after we started, and it's still there as a place of training for many cooks in England. I mean, Jamie Oliver came from the River Cafe. So when you have that level of good cooking, and then you have gardening, you're sort of positioned to really change the food system.